I'm Barzini. I want to thank you for helping me organize this meeting here today.
This is Don Emilio Barzini, a fictional character from The Godfather. What is fascinating is that Barzini's archetype, the shadow usurper, operates from behind the scenes, hides behind a mask of respect or concern, but is in fact driven solely by a cold hunger for power. We recognise the same image in the character of Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. Like Barzini, he maintains a facade of respectability, but acts from the shadows, coldly and strategically eliminating his rivals. Even in the animated film The Lion King, the archetype reappears in the figure of Scar, the uncle and traitor who deceitfully seizes the throne from Mufasa. In this video, we'll take a look at how Don Barzini's mental health and personality traits may shape his behaviour. To dive into the character, we'll check out some key scenes from the movie and their context, then end with some thoughts on his psychological profile. The Second World War has finally ended, Japan has surrendered, and the United States is filled with an upbeat mood due to the victory, economic growth, and the return of soldiers. Unfortunately, not all war veterans return to peaceful civilian life. Some, trained in violence and discipline, joined organised crime for various reasons, making competition within the Mafia even fiercer. In this new era, Barzini enters already holding an extraordinarily high status in the criminal world. He is the head of one of New York's 5 families, embodying an ambitious leader who uses this period to expand his influence. According to the book, Barzini profited from gambling, prostitution, sports betting, and narcotics. After the Corleone family, his was perhaps the strongest in New York and therefore in the country. It was his ambition to supplant Don Corleone as the most powerful and respected mafia leader in the country and to take over part of the Corleone empire. During this time, Don Corleone invites Don Barzini as an honoured guest to his daughter's wedding. Planning the assassination of Vito Corleone, Emilio Barzini accepts an invitation to Connie Corleone's wedding, pretending to show respect for Vito to skillfully conceal his true sinister intentions.
Hey, I'm Barzini.
At the wedding, Barzini sits among other mafiosi when suddenly he's photographed. Let's observe his reaction. Barzini attends Connie Corleone's wedding, pretending to show respect for Vito Corleone while secretly planning his assassination, demonstrating manipulativeness and deceit. Plans Vito's assassination without emotional hesitation and shows indifference to the photographer's rights, though he allows him to keep the camera, possibly to avoid conflict indicating lack of empathy and disregard for social norms. Orders his subordinates to seize the photographic film but personally destroys it, showing distrust of others and fear of exposure revealing paranoid caution and distrust. Emilio Barzini's actions superficially resemble traits described in antisocial personality disorder: manipulativeness, deceit, lack of empathy, disregard for social norms, and paranoid personality disorder, paranoid caution and distrust. Yet one scene alone is not sufficient to draw such conclusions, and within the Mafia context, these behaviours can be seen as adaptive rather than pathological. Importantly, Barzini does not act impulsively but strategically, which is why it is necessary to examine the subsequent scenes to gain a fuller understanding of his character.
Fucking Malamutes. I thought you lost your mind.
The control exerted by Barzini over images to avoid compromising documentation and protect his influence is mirrored by Joseph Stalin, General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Stalin actively used censorship to shape his public image. He ordered the destruction or alteration of photographs deemed undesirable or potentially damaging to his reputation. For instance, during the political purges, Stalin mandated the removal of enemies of the people. Negatives were destroyed, and edited versions were published to uphold Stalin's cult of personality and conceal his ties to the purged individuals. After the attempt on Vito Corleone's life, the balance of power in the New York Mafia shifted. The Corleone family lost part of its authority. The old Don had not yet recovered from his wounds. The eldest heir to the empire, Sonny, was killed, and the life of the youngest son, Michael, was under threat. An attempt had already been made on him, and his death seemed only a matter of time. Barzini had always acted from the shadows using others' hands, Sollozzo, Tattaglia, and police captain McCluskey. Thanks to this, he remained unscathed in the war. Now Barzini sensed his opportunity. He was the most ambitious of the Dons and sought to become the first among equals in the Mafia hierarchy. Before continuing the analysis, it is worth paying tribute to the actor's performance. Richard Conti's portrayal of Barzini was truly outstanding and unforgettable. In every gesture and line, one could sense his hidden authority. He displayed such mastery that with just a glance he could convince you he really was a Mafia Don, and each of his appearances infused the film with an atmosphere of looming threat. An interesting fact, it is hard to believe now, but at one point Conti was also considered for the title role of Don Vito Corleone, a part that ultimately went to Marlon Brando. At the meeting of the five families, Vito thanked Barzini for his help in organising it, and admitted that the war had been pointless. Both he and Tattaglia had lost sons, so he proposed peace and a return to the pre-war order. Barzini confirmed Vito's integrity.
We all know him as a man of his word.
But Tattaglia disagreed and reminded them of Vito's refusal to support his drug business. Vito explained this by saying that narcotics would destroy their connections.
Because I believe this drug business is going to destroy us in the years to come.
Then Barzini declared that times had changed and that such a refusal looked like an unfriendly act. He insisted on open access to politicians and judges for a price.
If Don Corleone had all the judges and the politicians in New York, then he must share them.
And the rules of the narcotics trade were outlined. Under control, kept away from children. Vito agreed, but emphasized the main point. The priority was peace. He warned those present that his son Michael must return safely from abroad. The parties agreed on the rules of the new business and concluded peace. Barzini creates the image of a fair arbiter, while in reality he pressures Vito through his puppets to force him to use his political connections to expand Barzini's drug trade, demonstrating manipulativeness and deceit. His argument about control and protecting children is purely a facade, since he effectively legalizes for himself and his allies a business that harms society, showing no concern for the immorality of such activity, which indicates a lack of empathy. His rhetoric is unemotional but logical and dominant. He formulates the rules and the others merely agree, which points to coercive authority. It is Barzini who sets the tone of the truce and the new order. Barzini declares that times have changed, ignoring morality and taboos, manipulating facts with the sole aim of creating conditions in which, if you do not help him profit from drug trafficking, you are an enemy, thereby demonstrating cold rationality. In this scene, Barzini displays traits that at first glance resemble antisocial personality disorder, manipulativeness and deceit, lack of empathy, as well as traits of narcissistic personality disorder demonstrating coercive authority. However, his coercive authority does not appear pathological, considering his status as a Mafia Don. Also, his cold rationality shows that he is not driven by impulses or uncontrolled emotions. He calculates everything and applies logical pressure on his opponents.
But I didn't know until this day that it was Barzini all along.
According to Freud, Barzini acts as a rational strategist, suppressing impulses and emotions. Here we see the manifestation of the ego, the part of the psyche responsible for realistic thinking and controlling desires. It restrains the id, the unconscious layer of instincts and drives that seeks immediate gratification. Barzini does not act impulsively, but plans coldly. However, his ambition and ruthlessness express the energy of the id, libido, redirected by the ego into the sphere of power and control. According to Jung, within the structure of the collective unconscious, Barzini embodies the archetype of the shadow, the dark side of society, representing hidden cruelty and the thirst for power. For the other Dons, he is the projection of a force they fear but at the same time acknowledge. He also displays features of the archetype of the ruler, the drive to be first among equals and to establish order under his authority. In the Five Families meeting scene, Barzini's behaviour resembles the policy of Mao Zedong, former chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, when in 1958 he launched the Great Leap Forward, a campaign to rapidly industrialise the country. Peasants were forced to build primitive backyard furnaces for steel production, sacrificing agriculture, which led to famine, mass deaths, and economic crisis. When Defence Minister Peng Dehuai dared to criticise these absurd measures, Mao declared him an enemy of the people. Both Mao and Barzini use the same logic. For their own purposes, they substitute morality and common sense with political demands and brand any disagreement as a hostile act.
After all, we are not communists.
Between the meeting and the funeral, the Corleone family was essentially on the defensive. They had lost a significant part of their influence. Their allies hesitated, waiting to see which side would prevail. Barzini was actively gaining strength, consolidating other clans, and looking for a way to finally push the Corleones out. This period appeared as a gradual relegation of the Corleones to secondary roles. Vito transferred the powers of Don to Michael, who displayed coldness, discipline, and a lack of emotionality, which distinguished him from Sonny. The enemies underestimated his potential. Soon after, Vito died, and all the respected representatives of the Mafia attended his funeral. At Vito's grave, people came forward to pay their final respects. Barzini approached the grave, and after laying flowers on it, he turned to Michael and bowed. Then Barzini stepped away from the grave, where there were fewer people, with a joyful smile as if this were not a funeral but a celebration. Tessio approached and proposed a meeting with Barzini on his territory, promising that it would help resolve all problems. Barzini uses Vito's funeral not as a solemn moment of respect, but as a stage to demonstrate his own ascendancy. After laying flowers on the grave and bowing to Michael, he immediately shifts into a celebratory tone, smiling, shaking hands with other dons, and behaving as if he had already attained the highest status in the Mafia hierarchy. Barzini, blinded by his own overconfidence, took Tessio's betrayal as the final move that had already secured his victory. He turns the ritual of mourning into a display of dominance, sending a symbolic signal that the Corleone family has lost power and that he is now the center of authority. His behavior resembles narcissistic personality disorder, grandiosity, a need for recognition. He also shows traits associated with antisocial behavior, using ritual respect as a mask for his own triumph, and disregarding social norms by celebrating at a funeral. But Barzini's smile and handshakes at Vito's funeral are the language of the Mafia, a demonstration of power, a claim to leadership, and a public triumph.
I always thought it would have been Clemenza, not Tessio.
It's the smart move. Tessio was always smarter.
Summing up all the scenes, Barzini's behavior displays traits that combine antisocial, narcissistic, and paranoid spectrums of disorders. However, such disorders can only be considered when behavior goes beyond the boundaries of socially acceptable norms. Barzini is a Mafia Don, the highest status in the criminal world, and within the Mafia environment, cruelty, manipulativeness, and paranoia are essential tools for survival. Therefore, Barzini's behavior is not pathological. It is exceptionally well adapted to the criminal subculture, where only the most rational and ruthless survive. Barzini had long been climbing toward the top, and he was just a step away from becoming the most powerful Mafia Don. That is why his death on the steps of the New York Supreme Court appears deeply symbolic. Only a few steps remain to salvation, but he never reached the summit. I really appreciate you watching this video until the end. If it's not too much trouble, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and a comment. It really helps the channel grow and speeds up the release of new videos.